Greetings, everybody. This is Muhammad from Democracy Darkar. Democracy Darkar is a podcast and means democracy at work. This is a one-person podcast started in 2018 as a political and economic education project, mainly for Persian-speaking audience. The main idea is simple but a bit radical. Democracy should not stop at elections, parliaments, or at the local community. It must exist where people spend most of their lives at work. I argue that democracy in the workplace, especially through worker co-ops, is a real and sustainable way to move beyond capitalism. Not reforming it, not fixing it, but transforming it to something more just and more egalitarian. I consider myself a part of New Left or modern socialism, whatever you want to call it, but I care about democracy, freedom, justice, and people having real power over their own lives and futures. I believe without economic democracy, political change never lasts. Governments can change, leaders can change, but the system remains the same. That's why real transformation has to go deeper and has to start from where we are producing the value, the workplace. This project has been inspired by the work of Professor Richard Wolff in the organization called Democracy at Work. Normally I speak Persian here, but today I'm speaking English to you just because this is an emergency. Right now, there is a revolution happening in Iran, and in the last 2 or 3 days, there has been a massacre committed by one of the most brutal religious monarchy in the world, Iranian regime. When I say Iranian regime, I mean the whole structure of power, not just one government office or one army or police. The whole system, which is unified under the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, who has been consolidating power since late 80s when he became the supreme leader of Islamic Republic. Here I should mention, when I say Islamic Republic, I mean the whole structure of power in Iran. When I say Iran, I mean the nation, the country, and the people. What we know so far is horrifying. Estimates say between 5,000 to 6,000 people may have been killed in just a few days, in past few days. Some reports are talking about 6,000 people are murdered only in Tehran. We don't know what happened in the smaller cities or villages or in Mashhad, Shiraz, or wherever we don't get enough information from. Communication inside Iran has been almost completely shut down. This kind of blackout is something we have never seen before. People cannot even call their families on their landline. Still, some videos are emerging. Some images are coming out. We see hundreds of bodies gathered around one of the cemeteries in Iran. We have seen many footages of bodies of people shot to death with a real bullet in Iran. This is the biggest crime against humanity that this regime has committed against its own people in history. And now I want to talk directly to you, people outside of Iran, especially those who see themselves as progressive or leftist. It could be even liberal progressive, but I don't want to speak to fascists and the right wings of the world. Many of you are reacting in a way that it is deeply concerning, deeply wrong, I would say. Solidarity with the oppressed people does not work like that. We don't support people only when it is geopolitically clean or when it is clear and all of the other conditions of our beliefs and ideologies are met. People are being killed for demanding basic rights. That fact does not disappear just because US has interest in the region or because Israel wants a weaker Iran or unstable region. Some of you see Iranian regime as a supporter of Palestinians and therefore opposing it helps imperialism in the region. This is false. The regime, Iranian regime, has supported certain armed groups for its own interest, or maybe have been propagandizing against Israel throughout the last 47 years. This is not same as supporting Palestinian freedom or protecting Palestinian lives. We could talk about these details in a later point. And even if the regime of Iran had genuinely supported the oppressed people elsewhere, would it still justify murdering its own population? You cannot defend a repressive regime just because another repressive power opposes it. That is not anti-imperialism, that is moral confusion. Yes, the Middle East is complex. Yes, Western discourse is full of Orientalist assumptions. But this situation is not that complicated. I truly believe that. People are being shot, beaten, and killed for demanding life, dignity, and freedom. Standing with them does not mean you're supporting U.S. intervention or interest in the Middle East. It does not mean supporting Israel policies. It does not mean wanting another puppet regime. You could be against all of those. Those dangers are real. Everybody knows this. But none of that cancels the reality of mass repression happening right now. Oppressed people often grab onto anything that helps them survive. Palestinians may work with Iran against Israel. Iranian may look to outside pressure against their own regime. That does not mean love, loyalty, or agreement. It means desperation. Desperation created by decades of violence, control, and suffocation. We need to be morally consistent. I hope all of us want to be morally consistent, and if so, we should stand with people against repression everywhere. No exception, no excuses. Anything else is not solidarity. It's selective politics pretending to be principles. Among progressive lefts or progressive forces outside of Iran, some people took the correct position. Figures like Yanis Varoufakis, Cornel West, and the left party Die Linke in Germany showed moral clarity and consistency. Even though the left party Die Linke was not very fast to recognize the genocide in Gaza because of the German history, but this time they made the correct decision. These people who spoke against the Iranian regime were not the majority. Many others fell into the serious political and moral error. I will not name them here, but you know who I'm talking about. What makes it hard is Iran's situation, which does have its own internal complexities, and one of them needs explanation. Many of you may have seen images from rallies outside of Iran where some opposition groups raised Israeli flags. I'm very sorry about that. But this is deeply disturbing, even for us, for the progressive forces in Iran. But it does not come from nowhere. This group is commonly known as monarchists, Saltanat Talab. They are shaped by nostalgia for the former Shah's regime. Over the past 10 to 15 years, maybe 20 years, they have been politically and culturally manufactured through the Persian language media network funded by Saudi capital and wealth that the Pahlavi family removed from Iran during 1979 revolution. Two major networks played a central role. One of them is called mailto TV and the other one is called Iran International. Before that, there were networks sympathizing with previous nostalgia of a great Iran before revolution. Nobody wore hijab, nobody was forced to be religious. People drank alcoholic beverage. They could go with a bikini to the beach. They took these signs as a sign of being progressive or being modern. And the other signs of wearing hijab, having a lot of beard with the mullahs dressing code, and also they couldn't go to the beach, they couldn't be naked, they couldn't drink alcohol. They took these phenomena and signs as a part of, or like as a sign of being backwards or being not modern, or like ancient culture which you have to throw away. Those early networks were working on this nostalgia, and the music, of course, the pop music in Iran before the revolution, which was banned until, I want to say, until mid-90s, and after that, the pop music emerged in Iran too. So they took all of these signs, and then they were playing on this type of nostalgia. But with these new networks, the massive financial backing from Saudi, they distorted the history and the political history too. They promoted nostalgia for a so-called Iranian great empire based on the Cyrus the Great nostalgia or like heritage. They highlighted a narrow set of social developments and economical developments that has been done during the Shah's regime, and erased repression, torture, and dictatorship side of it. Over time, they pushed the idea that the 1979 revolution was simply a reactionary and a backward movement, and Iran's salvation lies in returning to the past. Make America great again? So this is exactly similar. One feature of the past was relatively friendly relation between Shah's regime and the Israeli government and United States government. The public actions of Reza Pahlavi, the sons of previous Shah, who is the so-called leader of Iranian movement, in cultivating relation with Israel reinforced this narrative. Another factor was absence of a strong progressive alternative. Western power had previously invested in People's Mujahideen Organization MEK of Iran for decades as a possible replacement or possible alternative to the Islamic Republic right after revolution. US and its allies tried so hard to make this alternative as a viable option. But even with armed forces and attack in Iran, even during the Iran and Iraq war and so much propaganda, they couldn't do that. When it becomes clear that these groups have no basis, neither inside Iran nor among the diaspora, the investment collapsed. At this point, Western and regional capital shifted toward the monarchists. Money flowed into the media networks, into branding Reza Pahlavi, and into presenting this group as a main opposition voice. This happened not because of genuine popularity, but because of a political vacuum. Well, maybe not a political vacuum, because of the lack of resources and the capital for the other people, other progressive people, to be able to raise their voices, and they were under massive repression and surveillance by Islamic Republic even outside of Iran. Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic regime's media strategy, constantly silencing leftist, labor-based, and democratic opposition, helped amplify this group even more. Some of the loudest monarchist supporters today were not so long ago devoted supporters of Islamic Republic. Many of them were among the reformists in Islamic Republic. I personally know people close to Reza Pahlavi who fit this description. So everything is laid around and the field is ready for Reza Pahlavi to rise to the top of the voices of the opposition. During the previous uprising, known as Jina Revolution, Woman, Life, Freedom, Zan Zindagi Azadi, progressive and opposition forces made a strategic decision. They argued that if this group had supporters, it should be included, either as a party or as a part of transitional council. Many of people, including me, were unhappy with this because they were undemocratic. But we were democratic forces. Democratic principle meant they could not simply exclude them. We could not simply exclude them. But the experiment failed. Reza Pahlavi himself destroyed the coalition between him and many other big players, or I would say famous players because of other circumstances. When he realized he would be equal to others, that he would be only one vote, and that he would not be treated as a king or future king, he withdrew. Excessive demands, political immaturity, and repeated miscalculations ended that process. These were all done by Reza Pahlavi. The result of that collapse of coalition was deep disappointment among many people in Iran. But Zan Zindagi Azadi, or Woman Life Freedom Revolution, succeeded in a social context. It was a social revolution. It changed everything in Iran. All of the power struggles of the women in Iran were flourishing during this time, and we have seen that the Iranian society has changed and is not going back. But today, in the latest wave of protest, some people inside Iran, desperate, exhausted, and grabbing onto any symbol that promises escape from this repressive regime, are chanting the name of this figure, Reza Pahlavi, and his group. This is not an ideological conviction. It is the result of a political vacuum, manufactured visibility, and years of repression of other forces. We do not know exactly how many people or how much real support this individual has. Measuring it accurately is genuinely impossible. What can be said is that his visibility and apparent support were higher than the previous waves of protests. But this picture is misleading. Since media outlets linked to monarchist networks, as well as BBC Persian, have extremely loud megaphones. And during the blockade in Iran, these are the only networks that people can see via satellite TV. There is no satellite TV for leftists. There is no satellite TV for progressive forces in Iran. They were, but they don't have this kind of reach. These networks constantly present Reza Pahlavi to Iranian and to the outside world as the leader of the revolution, while his critics and alternatives have no comparable access to the mass media, to these mass media. When we look at the social media spectrum more closely, though, another pattern appears. His camp has relied heavily on influence operation, buying impression, followers, engagement, and using bot network, something like the tactic that resembles the exposed tactics of Cambridge Analytica scandals. Even with all of these artificial amplification, the voice opposing them, pro-democracy activists, Republicans, lefties, liberals, remain just as present and just as loud in the social media. So this could tell you something, right? In any large society, including Iranian, there are also fascists and far-right extremists. Israeli flag, Trump supporters, and the people openly cheering for military action on Iran belong to this fringe. They do not represent Iranian society as a whole. Some may even accept the idea of a foreign attack, but they chant the name of this individual not because they want him, but because they see his weak and symbolic leadership during transition period as a less catastrophic than a full-scale war or military occupation by United States. Many Iranian liberals and moderates also tolerate this analysis. They believe After fall of Islamic Republic, democratic mechanisms would allow competent figures to take real power, regardless of who plays a symbolic transitional role. Among them are also those who see the damage done by Islamic Republic as so severe that they start to begin considering humanitarian intervention as an option. But what they fail to understand is that the US intervention in Iran has never been and could never be humanitarian. We have the example of Afghanistan and Iraq and many other interventions by United States. But they fail to remember or acknowledge the history that all intervention by United States had a catastrophic outcome. Still, some believe that for a short moment, Iran's interests and interest of figures like Donald Trump appeared to overlap. And this is the rope that I just mentioned before. And this can be held briefly just to stop the killing and this murderous machine of Islamic Republic. This is not a political clarity. It is exhaustion. Understanding these contradictions matter. No matter how much we try to be consistent, we are always full of contradictions. Iranians too, but this should be understood. I want to give you a little bit of sense of how the Iranian society is built up right now. Very roughly speaking, inside Iran today, perhaps 10 to 15% of the population still supports the regime, mostly out of religious identity and under constant state propaganda. There shouldn't be count as a real supporter, many of them. But some of them are benefiting from the regime, and I would say they are real supporter of the regime. According to surveys by foreign institutes, around 10 to 20 or maybe 25% express support for monarchy, or at least express support for constitutional monarchy, I would say. And like maybe I should say, many of the people who are supporting monarchy, they are only talking about constitutional monarchy, of course. These people are supporting monarchy largely because their voices are artificially amplified. The majority of Iranians are trapped between these two forces, and they are being crushed between these two jaws of authoritarianism and fascism. One final point is necessary to mention here, especially for those who identify as Muslim or as religious, or who hesitate to condemn this regime because it carries the name of Islam. Islamic Republic of Iran is one of the most bloodthirsty regimes of modern history. I place it on the same moral level as Israel, similar in the structure and similar in cruelty. I was born Muslim. I was raised as a Muslim family. I practiced Islam for many years. Islam can exist as a tolerate, humane, and non-political faith, or as a political Islam, Islam of Taliban, Islam of slaughter, annihilation, and holy violence. And you all know who made it possible for this type of Islam to raise voices and to come to the power in Middle East, United States. It was fabricated. In the ideology of Islamic Republic, protecting and preserving the Islamic system is more important than everything else, more important even than the Imam of Zaman, the savior figure in Shia's belief. This is not interpretation. This is a direct statement by Ali Khamenei. A system whose survival can justify killing and not protecting even the savior of humanity in their belief. For those who are not Shia or not Muslim at all, imagine this. Imagine the US government entirely controlled by extremist evangelical Christians. Imagine they also took over the Vatican. And imagine they declared that preserving their state could justify killing Jesus Christ if he were returned to the earth to save the humanity. Since I started recording this podcast today's morning at around 10 o'clock in the morning, today's is Monday, January 12th, and now when I'm closing and ending this podcast at 11 o'clock at the night, European time, I have heard and saw some reports that they are confirming 6,000 deaths in past 2 to 3 days in Iran. This makes it the most brutal crackdown of the street protesters in recent history, maybe after World War I. I'm trying to keep calm to be able to explain this stuff to you and not cry my eyes out. And I beg you to understand what I'm explaining and listen again if you didn't. And if you have any questions, just write me at info@democracydarkar, DARKAR.com. If you want me to explain more stuff or brief you about the situation from a progressive eyes in Iran, please let me know. I will try my best to do that. Even recording a podcast in English is really not my thing because it takes more time than producing it in Persian. But we are at the verge of turning point of history. We need to understand Iran is going to change. We are at the breaking point. This cannot go any longer. People are so angry and infuriated, and they might even consider other actions, more violence, and start doing the things that we are all afraid of. And we have seen the same situation in Syria. In Syria, you and we didn't support the progressive movement in Syria. We didn't support the real people who were protesting against Bashar al-Assad. And after 10, 12 years of murderous war, a person who came to the power, who is ruling only on 1/5 of a country, and he is an American puppet, a brutal dictator and a brutal criminal of the war from Daesh, from ISIS, and he's ruling in the favor of United States and Israel in this region of Syria. We really want to avoid that, don't we? As an Iranian, this is a horrifying thought that I don't even want to think about. But among all of this propaganda, we need to control the narrative of the people, what is right for them. They have every right to decide what is going to happen to them, and they need your solidarity, my support, and we need to be consistent in our solidarity around the world for repressed people of the world. I hope we can come out of this victorious. And lastly, a word to my Persian listeners. سلام، ممنونم که این قسمت رو هم شما هم گوش دادید و امیدوارم بتونید این قسمت رو برای همه کسانی که ازشون ناراحتید که نفهمیدن سولیداریتی با مردم ایران یعنی چی و در موضعشون نسبت به فلسطین و ایران و کشورهای دیگه واقعا کانسیستنت نبودن، این رو بتونید پخش کنید و بهشون معرفی کنید و اونا هم بتونن گوش بدن. از قسمت بعد من شروع میکنم ادامه، البته این هم انقلاب در راهه ولی سعی میکنم انقلاب در راه ها رو ادامه بدم و قسمت بعد همونطور که گفتم میخوام به جنبش پهلوی و این سلطنت طلبها و اینا بپردازم که چرا اینا اصلا همون رهبری متمرکز دقیقاً باعث تفرقه است تو ایران، نه باعث اتحاد. این قسمت 32 از دموکراسی در کار پلاس، قسمت 14 از انقلاب در راهه که در 12 ژانویه 2026 و ساعت آغازین صبح روز سه‌شنبه 22 دی 1404 منتشر میشه. به امید پیروزی.